Hey, cuties. This is the Dark Side of Perfect. I'm your host, Maggie, and today we are going to be talking about figuring out what kind of energy is needed in different situations, how to find softness versus hustle and productivity versus creativity, and we're going to be doing that through the lens of looking at masculine versus feminine energy. Let's talk about it. I feel like I'm a bit behind in the trend of this topic just because this podcast is so new. When I was going through this journey, this was a really big thing, stepping into your divine feminine, masculine versus feminine energy, and putting a name to it really helped me figure out where I was using different energy and how to use it differently because I had that name and that label attached to it. For some reason, I couldn't wrap my head around the hustle versus the softness, the fast versus the slow without the names. And so this helped me once I was trying to emerge from the should trap, going through that middle space, trying to figure out what my next steps were, figuring out where in my life needed different energy because energy is used for different parts of life. And masculine and feminine energy are not about men and women. Everyone has both, and the goal is alignment in your life. And I'll use some metaphors later, which hopefully will bring this into some perspective. But for example, many high achieving women get rewarded almost exclusively for masculine coded energy, and then later they feel burnout and unsure of how to access rest. I went out with my mom the other day because I needed to give her a belated Christmas gift, and we were talking about this idea. And she said that she listened to a podcast that said that perfectionism is rigidity for your intensity. So, like a structure for your intensity. And to step out of perfectionism, it isn't helpful to slump, but just to redefine the structure for intensity. I thought that that was really important for this episode, even though it is talking about perfectionism specifically, because masculine energy is the structure and feminine energy is the softness that the structure guides. So I think it's helpful as a perfect girl, as someone dealing with perfectionism, people pleasing, any of the results of perfect, to redefine the structure for the intensity so that it has somewhere to go. And putting the labels of this energy distribution on it can help redefine that structure and help us make new lanes in our life to direct us and direct our intensity without leading to burnout, without giving in to the results of perfect, which is why I think it's important to discern this energy distribution and why I think it's relevant to the dark side of perfect and relating to perfectionism and the results of perfect, because the energy distribution is an important metric to use when we're making a new structure for our lives. I'm going to define these energies, masculine versus feminine, so that we can really know what we're talking about. And then we can get into why it matters, misalignment, how it shows up, and practicing some energy placement. But first, we need to define it so that we are all on the same page of what we're talking about. Masculine energy is focused, linear, task oriented. It's the structure and direction by which we follow the plan. That is masculine energy. Hustle culture, doing the most, project management. It's associated with clarity, protection, leadership, and momentum. And the outcomes of using masculine energy are, excelling in school, excelling in your career, productivity, culture. So, our culture in the United States is very much defined by masculine energy. It's very hustle, very be productive all the time. So, a lot of us fall into that trap of using masculine energy in overdrive because it's what we've always been taught to. And then it leads to an overuse of that energy and not a good balance with the feminine energy, which is being, flow, receptivity. It's intuitive, nonlinear, relational. It helps with creativity, emotional processing, and rest. And it's often associated with expansion, curiosity, connection, play, but it's often dismissed as unproductive or indulgent. So when you're thinking about these two energies and how they work together and how they play together, I have a couple of metaphors for us. The first one I think we can all relate to. I'm sure all of us have taken a music class at some point, or at least know what music looks like. Masculine energy is like the sheet music, and feminine energy is like the music. So the sheet music provides structure, timing, guidance, and then the music is feeling and expression and life. And you can follow the sheet music perfectly, but the song can feel empty, or you can play the music deeply with your whole heart and soul, but struggle to finish it without the structure. Meaning happens when both are present. If that metaphor doesn't align with you, I have another one. So think of masculine energy as a lighthouse sitting on the rocks, the waves bumping up against the rocks, the lighthouse casting its light over the sea, moving in its arc motion that it moves in. And then the feminine energy is the tide. So the come and go of the waves, the whirlpools, the up and down of the waves, maybe even the moment before the waves come crashing down. The lighthouse offers direction and steadiness for the ship, right? It doesn't move, but it does help to guide motion. Whereas the tide is cyclical, emotional, intuitive, and always changing. If you have the tide without the lighthouse, the ship will hit the rocks. And if you have the lighthouse without the tide, then what's even the point of the lighthouse? Problems arise when we try to make the tide still or expect the lighthouse to move with every wave, but meaning happens when both are present. From a science-y perspective, masculine energy aligns with sympathetic activation when regulated. So this is a part of your nervous system that leads to focused action and to that hyperfixation, to that drive in us moving forward. Whereas the feminine energy aligns with a parasympathetic state, which is rest, digestion, creativity. I'm sure you've heard the words sympathetic and parasympathetic in like a yoga class, because in yoga, they're trying to help you relax through mindful movement and tap into your parasympathetic nervous system. So the masculine energy, the sympathetic nervous system, is aligned with fight or flight, and that handles, more active functions, whereas the parasympathetic is the rest and digest division of your automatic nervous system, calming the body, conserving energy, things like that. Neither is better, but problems arise when one chronically dominates the other. So, like a yin yang situation, they balance each other with both of them being necessary. So, now that we know what these energies mean, what they look like, we put a name to them. Why does it matter? Naming these energies gives you a choice, or at least for me, it did. When I was first learning about this, I would constantly think to myself, kind of like a mindfulness activity, what energy does this situation actually need? In my previous episode, or maybe the one before that, I was talking about slowness and how you should physically slow yourself down. And if the situation does not need super hustle, fast paced masculine energy, then why are you using that energy? Physically slow down. Step into your feminine energy, your being, your flow. Slow down. What energy does the situation actually need? And sometimes the answer is masculine. Sometimes the answer is feminine. Sometimes it's a little bit of both. If you are in school or you tend to hyperfixate, I use a Pomodoro method. And so sometimes the situation needs, 40 minutes of masculine energy, of that real hyper intense focus work, and then 10 minutes of floor time. A little bit more softness, 10 minutes of noticing my breath, 10 minutes of maybe going on a really slow, intentional walk just around the block. Naming energies gives you a choice, because instead of asking, what should I do or what should I be doing, you can ask, what energy does this situation actually need? Perfect girl energy often demands applying masculine energy everywhere. As a structure for the intensity is the masculine energy, the hustle, that I need to be doing something, that I need to get off the couch. I need to be doing something 100% of the time, because that's what I should be doing. That's what I feel I should be doing. People are going to be disappointed in me if I don't. I'll be disappointed in me if I don't. So you tap into that masculine energy everywhere as a structure for that intensity. And then when you realize that you've been using this masculine energy chronically, you full swing so hard into the feminine energy, and all of that structure disappears. And this can often happen in times of transition, like leaving high school going into college, leaving college going into the workforce, or grad school, or whatever, and then post grad school. That structure disappears in your everyday life. And so then it disappears internally and you full pendulum swing to the other side because you're not really sure what happens next. The goal here is not living in one energy, but placing that energy intentionally. It's figuring out the structure, figuring out where softness is needed, what energy you need to be placing into different situations instead of chronically, constantly putting yourself in fight or flight because you're constantly trying to be productive. Speaking of that pendulum swing of you've been in masculine and now you want to be more in feminine, and many people are drawn to the idea of stepping into your divine feminine after over-identifying with masculine productivity. So they fully swing into feminine. They fully get into their creative endeavors. They'll sit on the couch, they'll lose that structure, they'll fall into a slump, feel so much guilt about that slump. But divine feminine really is not about passivity or aesthetics or constant calm. It's about boundaries and anger and creativity and grief and sensuality and intuition. It's not about turning femininity into another performance or standard. It's not about being, I can be the most relaxed in the world. I can go to 100 yoga classes. It's about feeling what you're feeling and leaning into the energy of creativity and softness and intuitiveness. When I was going through this and I full pendulum swinged into feminine energy, I was, meditating a lot. I was trying to find rest, find calm. A lot of what that ended up being was me sitting on the couch watching TV as rest, which is fine. But then I wanted to optimize my rest and monetize it because I was lacking that structure and there was nowhere for that intensity to go. I wanted to become a yoga instructor, a Pilates instructor. I wanted to figure out a way to turn my feminine energy into profit. And in this masculine energy culture that we are in, I think that's a really common thing. And I did get my yoga instructor certification, and I don't teach yoga. I never did, but I did get the certification. And then I realized I didn't want to do that it wasn't my strong suit of developing classes and teaching people. I wanted to do what I'm doing now, but I was trying to find an outlet that made my feminine energy productive and made it more in the realm of masculine energy so that I could justify rest and I could justify being a person who went to yoga regularly without, the need of having it be the best yoga in the world and justify my existence because I was so deep in my feminine energy, but I was so used to being in my masculine energy. Without having an outlet for the intensity that I had been feeling for so long, I took what was supposed to be a restful time in my life and tried to turn it into intensity. What I really learned, and what I think is hard to learn, but these labels really helped, was feminine energy helps you hear what you want, and masculine energy helps you act on it. And if you are so far to one side, then neither of those things will happen. There won't be a balance. And then one will intuitively take over. For me, it's masculine energy, the hustle, will intuitively take over. And then you won't be able to enjoy the other one. I'm going to talk about some different areas of life and what misalignment can look like. And then I'm going to talk about some life application and what it looks like day to day. So I'm going to go big and then go small. The first area of life is career, which we associate with masculine energy. The productivity, the hustle, getting to the top rank, doing the best work that you can possibly do. So if you have too much masculine energy in your career, it'll lead to burnout, rigidity, and identity tied to output and falling into the should trap. So I've been working at my job, I'm working up the corporate ladder, I'm doing everything I should be doing, but then I go home and I scroll on my phone and I feel miserable and I hate my job, even though I actually really like what I'm doing, but I hate waking up in the morning and going to my job. And if I mess up in a meeting, if I miss a meeting accidentally, if I mess up time zones, I'm a failure. My identity is tied to the output that I'm giving at this job, and I'm trying to give my all, and my all is not good enough. If you have too much feminine energy in your career, it can feel like drifting, a lack of direction, and then it can result in guilt. So I'm at this job that I took because I thought I should, and, it's a good job for now. I still don't know where I'm going. I feel so guilty for not doing something that I feel lives up to my potential, and it's not challenging me in a way that I feel like it should be. So if you're in either of those buckets, then what steps can you take to bring in the softness of the other one or the hustle of the other one? If you're in a job that you're working so hard at and your identity is tied to output, maybe do some journaling, do some reflection, try and figure out where you can delegate, where you can take steps to lower your load while still working to your full potential. Maybe take a vacation, maybe find something outside of work that you look forward to so that your whole life isn't work. If you're in too much feminine energy and you're drifting and you have a lack of direction and you're in a job that you feel isn't what you want to be doing and it's not living up to your potential, then maybe start just looking at some job descriptions, figuring out what you do want to do. I think if you're feeling either of these, a really common solution is to go back to school or to switch careers entirely. And that does not have to be the case. It does not have to be all or nothing. The next one is relationships. And this could be any kind of relationships: parental, siblings, friendships, romantic relationships, relationships with your dog. I don't know. If you are feeling too much masculine energy, what this can show up as is control or emotional shutdown, being, emotionally unavailable or overly emotional because you're feeling so burnt out and like you can't control the situation and you just feel that tightness in your chest, that anger, that sadness, that need to control something that you cannot control. When I was in college, actually, this is a good example. I had this roommate and we didn't really get along, but I was in my chemistry degree and I was putting a lot of masculine energy into a lot of hustle because I had to. It's a very hard degree and I was studying a lot and I was at school, 7 a.m. to maybe midnight, 11 p.m. I would come home and the trash wouldn't be taken out, the dishes wouldn't be done. And I barely even was there because I was always at school. And so what that led to was me freaking out on them and crying and screaming. And I'm not usually a very emotive person, but I was so overwhelmed with school and it had a huge effect on my relationships because I was so emotional. I couldn't regulate my emotions in a way that was healthy because I was too far in my masculine energy. And even if that's not the case, even if there's not some outward thing, maybe it's just your relationship. Maybe you're feeling like they're pulling away, or maybe you feel like you're not contributing enough. So you work in overdrive in your masculine energy to try and make those connections again. And it leads to control. And if they're pulling away, maybe you pull away. Feminine energy looks like people pleasing and loss of boundaries. So the structure to create those boundaries and maybe say what you want isn't there. Healthy dynamics allow movement between energies, and emotions can change to support when they do, making space for each other. In self-care, too much masculine energy can look like punishing routines. So working out more than you really need to and doing a lot, even if you're very sore, you're very tired, not listening to your body, being very punishing of yourself, having horrible self-talk, maybe forcing yourself to do things when you really, really don't want to in your routines. Feminine energy only could look like a lack of consistency in your routines, not keeping up with them in the way that you want to, in the name of I'm too tired. And there's a real balance with this one, right? You need the structure to support softness. So if you're too far in your feminine energy and you are thinking, well, I'm going to stay on the couch because I'm in my feminine energy and I'm not going to wash my face tonight and I'm going to sleep in my makeup, then obviously that could lead to some consequences. So if you set the structure of, oh, it's 9 p.m., I'm going to go wash my face and then I can come back out to the couch and finish my show or whatever I'm doing, then that is the structure to support the softness. The reflection here is, where am I forcing energy instead of allowing it? And then also, where am I avoiding structure in the name of softness? In the day to day, I just wanted to go over this really quickly, the day to day, because I feel like it can be really easy to identify it in these big picture items, career, relationship, self care. But how do I know if I'm too far in my masculine energy on a random Tuesday or too far in my feminine energy? Masculine day to day looks like making plans and sticking to them, setting goals and timelines, pushing through resistance to get something done, clear boundaries, decisive action, and measuring progress. For example, you want to get healthy, so you make a workout plan. You schedule time, maybe you join a gym, and this works until it becomes non-negotiable, until it becomes punishing. You force workouts when you clearly need rest, when your body is screaming at you to just take a rest, do a stretch day. It's obviously good to make plans and stick to them, set clear boundaries, have decisive action, measure your progress. Sometimes it's best to push through resistance if you don't want to do something to get something done. But when energy isn't supportive, it's controlling. And that's when the whole thing falls apart. Feminine energy day to day is checking in with how something feels, following your curiosity, rest, creativity, emotional processing, letting things unfold without forcing the outcome. Example, when you hate your job or you're not feeling fulfilled in your job or something's going wrong in your job. So you take the space to reflect, journal, and explore what lights you up. Maybe some small changes that you can make in your job. Maybe you reflect on some other things that you could be doing if you don't want to be at the job that you're at. But then you start postponing things until you feel ready, and then you feel lost and not restored. You spend so much time thinking and taking the space that you never actually move forward. Misalignment is subtle and persistent. We feel the need as perfect girls to pick one and to be at extremes with no integration. But balance comes from adding a small dose of what's missing and not shoving the energies together all at once. If we have two balls of light, we're not going to shove them together until they make a new full ball of light. That will just lead to sparks flying everywhere. We need to take a little bit of light from the different sides at a time and weave them together until we can find a balance that works for us and is like a perfect braid of light. Practicing this energy placement. If I'm stuck in masculine energy, maybe practice asking yourself, what would make this feel more supportive and not forceful? The point here is to introduce choice within the structure, within what you already have, and to build in planned rest. As an ADHD girly, sometimes it's very hard for me to stick to my planned rest because I am so afraid that if I sit down for 5 minutes, I won't get back up. So building in planned rest is setting a timer and maybe avoiding the triggers will keep you down. So scrolling on your phone, turning on the TV, maybe don't do those things. Maybe just actually sit down and breathe. Put your phone in another room if you know that that's a trigger for you that you won't get back up again. Let intuition inform the plan, but not override the plan. If you're stuck in your masculine energy, if you're in a situation, if you are working hard, if you're feeling tired and you know you need rest, take it. Or ask yourself, what would make this feel more supportive and not forceful? Maybe get yourself a nice drink. Maybe take a couple minutes where you're not even resting. You literally get up, go make yourself a tea, but do it as slow as you possibly can, and then come back to what you're doing. And then you have a nice tea and you took the slowness that you need. And then as you're moving forward in your life, you can continue to build those things up, but start small to introduce choice within the structure. If you're floating in a feminine energy drift, ask yourself, what small container can I add? What simple structure can you use to hold your curiosity? Set a gentle deadline, not a decision. A good example of this is when I am doing yoga or I'm working out, I usually try and work towards a goal of doing something like a handstand or crow or a complicated pose instead of I'm going to work out 3 days a week just to get stronger. Though I often will break it into smaller sections of goals. So instead of going straight to handstand, I'll work on holding myself up while having my legs on the wall, or I'll work towards my headstand or shoulder stand. I usually have a very specific goal of what I want that strength to contribute to in mind. And for some reason, that helps motivate me. So it allows me to keep my curiosity and keep my workout plan because I know that I'm working towards an outcome that is something cool that I want to do, even though it's not a full structure. Let action create clarity and don't wait for clarity to appear. You can't sit back and wait to feel ready. You can't sit back and wait for the clarity to hit you. Exploration, experimentation, curiosity are the ways to find clarity. And you won't find that clarity unless you do those things. So, daily check-in question is, what energy do I need right now or today? And then weekly, you can reflect back and think, where did I override my intuition this week with force? And again, that's not always a bad thing. Sometimes you got to get things done. But recognizing when it happens and how you can find slowness in those instances, how you can find that balance, just even setting a timer, doing Pomodoro, making your slow tea is helpful. And then also reflecting on, where did I avoid action when clarity was available? Always remind yourself that rest is not a reward. You don't have to earn rest. And structure is not oppression. It can just be a small container to encourage your curiosity. Try one small shift. And how does it feel in your body and not just your mind? This isn't about perfect balance, but awareness and building self-trust. And it's helpful as we explore different avenues on self-discovery to think about the different energies that you're using and the distribution of energy and what you need at that time, so you can figure out what you actually want and get out of the should trap. If this was confusing or it made you think a little bit about where in life you have been using different energies or where you fall on this spectrum of masculine energy and feminine energy, then we are on the right track to self-discovery. Thank you so much for listening to this episode. I hope that you learned something about yourself and figured out where you fall within masculine energy and feminine energy. Maybe we're thinking of some examples in your own life of where you can make a shift to add in more structure or more softness. If you like this episode and the podcast as a whole, I would really appreciate it if you follow, left a comment, liked, rated it. It really does help. And then also, if you're on Instagram and you want to follow the podcast Instagram, it is darksideofperfect.pod. That is darksideofperfect.pod. I hope you're finding joy wherever you are today, and I will see you next time.